Hello and welcome to the Dreaming and Doing podcast with me, Nicky Raby. I'm an actor, coach, writer, speaker, podcaster and a mum. And in my coaching work, I work with creatives, personal brands, freelancers and small businesses. In my podcast, I talk about success, but not in a traditional sense. I have conversations with those who have built a business from something they love or who have made a pivot in their career. Also those who have built a brand or a job that maybe didn't exist when they were at school and they found a way to monetize their skills, talents and expertise. I've spoken to loads of incredible people, coaches, designers, journalists, app creators, magazine editors, bloggers, content creators, authors, and all-round movers and shakers. I ask the questions that you want to know the answer to. So, how they started, about money, saying no, saying yes, pitching, presenting, putting yourself out there even though it terrifies you, standing out in a busy online world, growing, scaling and making your work for you and your circumstances. The show notes are always at nickyraby.com/podcast and the conversation continues across social media, often on Instagram, my favourite platform, at Nicky Raby. Thanks so much for listening. It's great to have you with us. In today's episode, I'm talking to Sophie Lambert, who is a literary agent at Curtis Brown. I know so many of my clients and so many people I know actually, they all have a book in them. They all have something they want to write and perhaps share with the world, or perhaps just share at home quietly in a very introverted manner. But I wanted to talk more about the process of what that looks like, what it's like to work with an agent, what agents are looking for, and how you actually get things out into the world. You know I'm all about action and I like that step-by-step process. So hopefully you'll gain lots of insight from my lovely chat with Sophie today. And if you do want to come and join in the conversation, please do. The best place is Instagram at Nicky Raby, and the show notes as always are over on my website on the podcast page. And that's it for now. Check out my website for some exciting things that are happening in 2019 that I've just released this week, and there's an early bird price until the 21st of December. So you want to be involved or you want to come and ask me some questions about it, please do. hello at nickyraby.com, and here's the episode. Hi Sophie, welcome to the podcast.
Hi Nicky, thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's so lovely to speak to you. Can you just start by saying what you do and perhaps maybe how you would describe your job title?
Of course, yes. So I'm a literary agent at C&W, which is part of Curtis Brown. And literary agents represent fiction and non-fiction authors. And we help develop their work creatively and then find them the best possible publishing deal.
Fantastic. And how did this start for you? Was it a career that was available in the early days? Were you just a big bookworm that wanted to get involved? How did it begin?
Yeah, I have always been a big bookworm. And I remember as a child, as you're always asked, what did I want to be when I was older? And to be honest, at that stage, I wanted to be an author myself. And then I went off to university and did an English degree and finished and had no idea what I wanted to do. So obviously went off travelling and avoided the question for another year. And on my return, thought I'd perhaps want to be a journalist. And in the meantime, needed to get a job. So I got a job in Charing Cross Road, which at the time, in the early noughties was still this wonderful book mecca in London. And I got a job at Blackwell's. And after, I think, probably 3 months or so, the manager came up to me and said, "Oh, would you be interested in taking on a buying position?" So what that involved was me meeting publishing reps and choosing books for the bookshop, which was just an amazing job. And so I sort of fell into publishing really, and was a bookseller for a number of years and a buyer. And then I moved to New York with my boyfriend, now husband's, job. And I think on the basis of being English and having an English accent, I got a job at a literary agency as an assistant. And bear in mind, I had never worked in an office. I certainly couldn't type. I was just used to ordering books and arranging books and selling books. And I loved it. And I quickly learned how to type. And after 3 years in New York, I came back to London. And after having my first child, I then joined a very small literary agency and built my list up from there, really.
Fantastic. And how has your job, well, I guess sort of as an earlier question, what does your job look like on a day-to-day basis?
So, I mean, part of the joy of my job is that every day is honestly very different. As I said, I represent fiction and non-fiction writers. So on any given day, I might be speaking to or meeting with or editing or reading something by a journalist or something by a crime writer or something by a literary novelist. So really intellectually stimulating and different. I'll often be having coffees or lunches with different editors to find out what they are looking for. So a key part of my job is to network lots within the industry and, keep an eye out for who's buying what and why certain things are appealing to certain publishing houses. Sometimes I'll meet international publishers. Sometimes I'll meet book scouts who are looking to inform foreign publishers about what's hot and what's selling in the UK. But a large part of my day is working creatively with the authors who come to me and look for representation, but they will also be looking for creative guidance, whether that's in formulating a non-fiction book proposal or writing the novel. So it really, really is an incredibly privileged position to be in.
Yeah, I can imagine. And it always just it's one of those worlds, I think, that's still quite mysterious, even though it's it's an old industry, that there's such a glamour to it, and that sort of smell of libraries and all that good stuff. All the tweed jackets that go on. But so I guess what does the role as an agent look like? Because I know what it looks like in terms of acting, and I've had some belting ones and less belting, should we say. But what is your role in not only in terms of strategy, but also how you collaborate with the people that you represent?
Yeah, so I mean, I always think about my role as being the best possible champion and advocate for my authors. And when I take someone on or when I offer representation, I'm always doing it with an eye to representing them for their career. It's not just for one book or, 2 books. So it has to be a relationship that's very much based on trust and on a shared vision. Yes. for a specific project, but also for a career. So I suppose I see myself as sort of key cheerleader throughout. So from the incarnation of a project sometimes through, multiple drafts until we get to the submission point. And then after we've found a, best possible home for that project with a publishing company, then I'm there to make sure that if need be, I can play bad cop so that the author always has, a nice, easy or easier relationship with the publisher. So any awkward conversations can come from my end. If an author's unhappy about a jacket or a marketing strategy or something like that, I'm very happy to take on that sort of role. And then that really continues and evolves throughout a writer's career. So some of the authors that I'm working with write a book every 12 months. So I suppose we're in more frequent contact than an author who perhaps only writes a book every 4 or 5 years. But what every author needs is slightly different, because some people need more help shaping something structurally, whereas others need more help thinking in terms of sort of the drama in a story, or if it's non-fiction, coming up with specific framing devices for an idea that they have. But it is this case of being the very best advocate and champion for your author's work. And I think that's the one thing that has to underline and underpin it all.
Absolutely. I know that everybody says they have a book in them, and I'm sure that my dad's book would be Liverpool FC, 98 to whatever it might be. But I think, we could all do those sort of mastermind topics, but it is one of those things that sometimes and I know my clients will say, I'll do it next year, or I'll do it when I have that fortnight off in that summer where or when the children leave home. But I know so many people now who are looking at writing books, but to use it almost as a foundation or as a business strategy to support the rest of their work. How has that been in terms of the changing of the landscape of everybody's now becoming a brand and a personal brand? How have books sort of supported that, or perhaps maybe got in the way? Or I'd love to hear your thoughts around there.
So, I think first of all, it's probably important to say that I think something like only 10% of writers can make a living just writing. So the large proportion of the people I represent have another job or freelance or have another income stream, because generally speaking, it's not a lucrative career. It can be, but generally speaking, it's not. Obviously, the aim I have for all the authors I represent is that we're able to get them such great deals and to establish such great careers that they can then focus just on writing. But, realistically, what's changed, I think, the most is that with the demise of physical bookshops around the country, it's meant that lots of people buy their books online, and you just don't see the range that you would do if you went into a physical shop. Yeah. So discoverability is really challenging. And that continues to be the biggest issue for a new writer, is how does a prospective reader find you? And so part of the appeal and significance of marketing yourself and becoming a sort of brand or having a specific kind of platform is that you then can appeal to a specific demographic or potential readership that you might not otherwise be able to tap into. So there's, along with it becoming trickier, I think it's become much easier for writers to reach out to people. And obviously nowadays, I think a lot of readers love the fact that they can be in direct contact with authors via social media, which has been a really wonderful development, I'd say. But for someone who's starting out and considering the book as being the sort of foundation of their business model, or, I do, speak to people and say that I think the book should be a sort of platform provider, and it's like a very extensive business card in a way for some types of author. But having said that, while everyone might think they have a book in them, I'm not necessarily convinced about that myself.
I'm not going to be rushing out to buy Liverpool FC the early years. No, I think you're right. And I think once we've now got all these platforms where we can all become a blogger, or I remember when I left drama school, reality TV was starting to bubble, and then all of a sudden people were, getting acting jobs, and just because they'd been on Big Brother or something like that. And I think you do have to keep coming back to the things that you are actually really good at. And some people, it's it's writing, some people it's speaking, or looking after their pet, whatever it might be. That just because you think that you can doesn't, we've all sort of seen those terrible biographies that have been churned out over Christmases, and it's not necessarily the right thing. What do you look for when you're looking around, and where do you look, and what sort of excites you or intrigues you?
Mm-hmm. So, well, if it's fiction, it generally I'm driven by voice, which sounds like a very broad, vague thing, but I want to feel as though a writer is confident about the voice that they've written a novel in. I want it to feel as unique as possible. I want it to feel as compelling as possible. And so often writers have rushed to get something down on the page and not really thought about the showing they've been telling. It's that old cliche, and over and over and over again I say to people, you're telling me the story here, you're not showing it to me. So where fiction's concerned, that's definitely my sort of, I guess, what attracts me most straightforwardly. The quiet novel is really the most difficult novel to sell in the world. So unless it's some exquisitely written piece of literary prose, I will almost never go for something that just feels purely descriptive and very quiet, because quite honestly it's going to be a really challenging use of my time. And then for non-fiction, it's so different. My list is incredibly varied, and that really is just driven by different interests and different passions. But I think there are sort of three key questions that I tell people that a prospective editor will be thinking about when they're looking at a non-fiction book proposal. And those are the ones that I also think about. And those are, what's new here? What's new about this book idea? Why are you the right person to be writing this book? So what equips you to be a supposed expert or specialist? And why is now the right time to be publishing? So what's timely or urgent about it? And as whether you're a journalist or an expert, you need to be always keeping those three key points in mind, because part of my role is to anticipate reasons that a non-fiction editor will turn around and say no to something. So I need to be in the position where I can always turn around and say, oh, well, I've already thought of this. And
yes. Funny you should say that, however.
Exactly. So it's really varied, but I always want someone who has a very clear sense of what they're doing, which sounds like a very obvious thing to say, but it honestly is not the case. So many people come and say, well, I kind of want to write a book about, vaguely this and that. And unless they can really coherently sum up what they want to achieve in a couple of sentences, then it's never going to be clear enough to me either. And that sort of elevator pitch and that one paragraph pitch, they are really important, because ultimately that's what someone's going to read on the back of the book in the bookshop, and that's what's going to attract a prospective reader. So if the author can't do that about their own work, then the likelihood is that I won't be able to, and an editor won't be able to, and therefore there's big questions. So I want someone who's confident. I want someone who's already been able to think through what's been published in that area of the marketplace. And honestly, it doesn't matter if it's a pop culture book or a politics book or a science book or a nature writing book. I have the same sorts of questions for them all.
And I love that we're in this position now where I feel like there is much more of a sense and a permission that we can actually say proudly even though we might have to practice it a few times in front of the mirror, because we're told not to show off and all the rest of it, but we're starting to say what we're good at, and these skills are starting to come to the forefront. Because at my school growing up, if you'd said, gosh, I'm really talented at this, it would be like, well, we'll see you on the school bus on the way home, and it's not going to end well. But I think sometimes we can also be programmed to say that we're good at everything or we're available for everything. I know I've been an acting agent as an assistant between acting jobs before, and actually the hardest thing was when somebody would say, I just want to do everything, I don't mind. It doesn't help you to move forward because it's not a strategic move. You think you're being helpful, but actually you can niche down a little bit. It makes it much easier for those people around you.
Yeah, definitely.
Change since becoming a parent and reading books now with your children and seeing the world through their eyes. And your tired eyes.
Yeah, so I've got 3 children, varying ages, and I don't actually represent any children's books. So in terms of sort of overlap with my career, it's not sort of fed through, I guess. Adult and children's publishing is really quite separate. So whilst there are some agents who do straddle both, I don't. It's just too difficult to try and keep up with both worlds. But I think the biggest change really is that I have huge volume of reading to do, and I have to do some reading for work most evenings, and I've just had to become really fast. And I think as a parent, as you'll know, you have to become incredibly good at multitasking and incredibly good at doing things when you're half asleep in the morning, whether that's making packed lunch or organising book bags and so on. But I think in terms of how I work and what I'm drawn to, I think, yes, I've become more efficient, but I think that also just comes with experience. And I think I have become a lot more probably susceptible to certain kinds of emotional weight in books. And equally, I've also sometimes shied away from things because they felt too emotionally weighty, in the way that, when you've had a child, you often can't bear to watch a film that involves, children in peril or something like that, because it just all becomes too close. So I suppose it's changed me a little bit like that. But I think generally I've just become a busier, better agent.
Yeah, I do question what I was doing through the years of 17 to 30. There was a lot of hanging around. There were a lot of biscuits consumed and just a lot of just generally sort of hanging around yeah. But anyway, that's another story for another day. What keeps you sort of the best version of yourself, to use that awful phrase, but on a day-to-day basis, where you're wearing lots of different hats? Maybe you're working to a deadline or something comes in, or because I imagine that your job is sort of ever changing, that sometimes you can get that email on a Friday at 5 that you're like, oh, this is what we've been waiting for. Or equally, it's like, oh no, that is not the answer that we sort of wanted. How do you sort of change hats and sort of stay sane and calm and all those glorious features that we all are every day?
Yeah, so it is unpredictable, and sometimes things do pop into the inbox, or people do phone me and I have to get straight onto something, whether that's a disaster that's happening, something's been published that it shouldn't have, or whether it's something that I have to read immediately and put everything else down. Honestly, I think the fact that my husband is only in the office 3 days a week and is incredibly supportive of my career and has always seen our parenting as completely 50-50, that has probably been more beneficial to me than I could ever have dreamt. I don't know that we can be successful career women without having a partner who is as supportive if we've got children. So we always make sure, childcare is pretty evenly split. But occasionally I do have to just work really late into the night,
Yes.
or sort of not cook the best meal that evening. I mean, it really is sort of, I guess, often day-to-day negotiations and compromises in the way that I'm sure most working mothers and fathers have to adapt.
Yes, and there's always going to be wiggle room tomorrow to do something better, and it's okay to have fish fingers out of the freezer sometimes, because we can't do all the things perfectly all the time, and life is fluid, that things will pop up, and yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, look, fish fingers are great, and so are baked beans. It's fine.
Yes. And vaguely nutritious. And yeah, you're so right about it being a team and having those people around you, and I always am feeling very grateful that I'm still with my man of 11 years and had our child with him, rather than any of the other delinquents that may have been hovering around over the years. Yes, absolutely. What do you do to keep yourself buoyant and motivated and curious about your industry? What helps you to build up your inspiration and your curiosity if you're, like, for example, on the dark February days, for example?
So I think it's really important that I always maintain reading for pleasure, and it's something that can be really tricky to find time to do, and especially when you've got a huge inbox full of manuscripts that you need to edit. But I have to try and end every day with a bit of reading in bed, for lots of reasons. But I've over the last few months tried never to have my phone in the bedroom, which has been quite a tricky change because, like everybody else, I use it as an alarm clock. Yes. But it really has made quite a big difference to my sleep and my enjoyment of reading for pleasure. So that's been a sort of small but a significant change actually that I've made. And then in terms of maintaining inspiration and so on, I think part of the joy of being a literary agent is that you are naturally really inquisitive and quite competitive and want to be searching for the new and want to find books and projects that mirror changes that are happening in the world, or places that you're curious about, or very recently there's been thankfully lots of really interesting books on women and feminism, and so I think you can feel as though you can play a part in helping change things, helping change attitudes. I represented an incredible book by a nurse last year or this year, and I'd like to think that it plays a little part in trying to raise the profile of the NHS, for example. So I think that where my role is concerned, I can really make it feel current and significant and worthy, which to me is a really important part of my life.
I agree. I feel like I want to do that with this podcast as well. I had a chap reach out from America a while ago saying that he'd created 8 nightclubs or something in Texas. Wow. And he thought he would be a great guest. And to sort of reply, like, it's really brilliant and well done, but my guests don't really go to nightclubs, probably not in Texas either. But I feel the same in the way that I want to share stories of lots of different men and women doing great things, and it feels like it's a real privilege to be able to do that, and we have to be conscious about using our platforms. There's been a thing today about one of the Kardashians using, I don't know, something to keep herself thin and promoting that, and this generation that is coming up is much more like, you can't do that, and it's not cool to do. They're much more questioning. I mean, we were just sort of a bit immersed in Just 17, I think. So, and More magazine.
Definitely.
And parents being horrified that their 13-year-old was scouring that. But yeah, where would you like to be in 5 years' time, in business and life? What's kind of in the hopper, as it were, at the moment?
I'm very happy with my current role. So I think I would probably just like to see the authors that I'm representing doing even better. I would love, like any agents, to represent a Booker winner. I had one on the Booker long list this year, so that was quite a thrill. I, would like to be able to continue to try and have a good balance of work and home life, and being the best mum I can is the most important thing. But I do need to, I find, work for myself as well, for my own sense of identity and intellectual curiosity. And so if I can carry on madly juggling, and if I can throw in a bit more holiday time, that would be even better. I suppose we've all got room to try and become better at time management. So in 5 years, I'd love to be being more successful and being a better agent for my authors, but without necessarily having to break my back.
Yes. And I do find that each year that goes on, I get so much better at saying no, or putting better boundaries in place, or asking for what it is that I want. And I just wish that I'd had that sass when I was 23 and had no eye bags and all the time in the world. But I guess you learn that through wisdom as you get older and you mature in your industry.
Absolutely. And I think that failure is really, really important to ultimately becoming successful. And as an agent starting out, I definitely took on various projects which now I wouldn't probably have taken on, but I needed to go through the experience of representing projects which for various reasons didn't sell or weren't successful, and I learned huge amounts from that. So I think, in the early stages of careers, I think it's really key to take some risks and come out with the sort of experience and more confidence and knowledge. I wouldn't have had that had I not taken those risks. So I really recommend people to spend a small amount of their time doing that.
I love that. I was listening to Russell Brand's interview with Fern Cotton today, and he was talking about his addictive past and what that's taught him. And he was saying, not only that actually drugs and alcohol and sex addiction doesn't really help him in his day-to-day life, but he was also saying what it's taught him in terms of empathy or understanding or having much more connection to certain types of people and that life experience. And I think sometimes we can really be hard on ourselves when we failed or things didn't quite go the way to plan, but hindsight is a beautiful thing that will always pop up to say hello, and you're like, oh, there, or as my mum always used to say, it's character building. And you think at the time, I don't want to build my character, I just want to skip the hard work, but we don't get to do that very often, I guess. But,
no.
Yeah, but if people want to come and find you, not physically, but online, where should they go?
So I am very easy to find. So our website is cwagency.co.uk, and I've got my profile page with my email address there, so it couldn't be easier.
Lovely, brilliant. Well, I will add that into the show notes as well. But thank you so much. I'm going to actively turn off my computer, turn off my phone tonight, and curl up with a great book. I think Matt is in with Oscar tonight, so I'm looking forward to to doing a snow angel in the bed and getting stuck into a great book. But I've loved chatting. Thank you so much, Sophie.
Oh, thank you for having me on, Nikki, and enjoy the read.
I will. Thank you. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I would love to hear what you thought of the episode and share any takeaways with me. Come and find me across social media at Nicky Raby, or you can visit the podcast page, nickyraby.com/podcast.